What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to talk about my 5 biggest mistakes I made as a medical student and how you guys can avoid them. So for my first mistake was I took 2 gap years and I never really prepared myself to start studying for medical school. Now, I'm not saying you need to study medical content before going into medical school. I think that's actually a really bad idea, but I think you should get in the study mindset. Maybe pick up a book and read it about an hour a day, or just try and watch a few lectures on things that you're interested in and maybe take a couple notes for 30 minutes to an hour a day. Just get yourself sitting and focused in a study mindset, because it was really difficult for me to transition from working out all day, working in the ED 12 hours, and then just coming home and relaxing. As a medical student, you're sitting down at a desk studying for several hours a day. So I really kind of wish I worked myself into studying before I got into medical school. Now, my second biggest mistake was that I really didn't master the material that I learned through my first and second year classes the first time around. So the classes that we took were pretty fast paced, and I knew that we would have a very long dedicated amount of time studying for step 1 after second year. So I kind of banked on that study time to really master all of the topics you need to know for step 1. But really, you should not be using that dedicated step 1 study time to master topics. You should be using that study time to review these topics. So because I had to dive a little bit deeper into certain topics during this dedicated study time, I ended up delaying my step 1 exam, which leads me into my third biggest mistake. And my third biggest mistake was actually delaying my step 1 exam. Now, if you are in danger of failing step 1 or any step or board exam, it isn't necessarily a bad idea to push it back, but I just really wanted to score very well on step 1, and so I thought that if I just gave myself some extra time, I could really ramp up my score and get a really good score. But what I wasn't thinking about is how delaying my exam would impact me on my 3rd and 4th year of medical school. So because I delayed my step 1 exam, I actually had to have a passing score before starting my 3rd year rotations. So this actually ended up delaying my 3rd year a total of 8 weeks, which I was still able to graduate on time, but what it did was condense my 4th year, especially the first semester. It condensed the 4th year very tight and made things very, very difficult for me. So because I lost essentially 8 weeks in the beginning of my 4th year, that means I had a lot less study time for step 2. I had no time to do away rotations just because I didn't really have time to fit those extra rotations into my schedule, because I basically had to get these 3rd year classes done and then get ready to take step 2 for 4th year. And then because I really wanted my step 2 score to be on my application for residency, which I believe we sent out around September, I'm thinking, that actually rushed my step 2 studying to where I only took just under 3 weeks to study for the exam. Now, that's not necessarily a crazy short amount of time. People do actually take step 2 with less time than that, but just after finishing 3rd year rotations and essentially getting no break in between 3rd and 4th year, just because of my delayed 3rd year rotations, I was very, very burnt out by the time I took step 2, and I probably could have done a lot better on step 2 if I just would have taken step 1 on time and not delayed step 1 in general. Now, I think a lot of people won't run into this issue because step 1 is becoming pass-fail, so there's a lot less emphasis on step 1, and I'd really recommend you just take step 1, get it out of the way right when you're scheduled to. Like I said, because it is pass-fail, actually more importance will be shifted to step 2. So you definitely want to give yourself plenty of time to study for step 2. So after your first 2 years, you've kind of been hunkered down studying, putting in several hours a day, just sitting at a desk studying, and now it's time to go to your clinical rotations. I would say my 4th biggest mistake that I made as a medical student was I didn't really communicate with the residents well enough during the first half of my 3rd year. I didn't really understand what it took to be a good 3rd year medical student. I'm not a very big extrovert. I would consider myself a more quiet/shy person in general. So it's very difficult for me to go out of my way to talk to my residents and basically take initiative of the conversation. So what I mean by talking to your residents, I mean always asking them if they need any help, and then always taking the initiative to go see patients. Like if there's a new admit, say, hey, I don't mind going to see that patient. I can go and see them and write an H&P for you. Or asking questions about patient care that you don't understand. Now, asking questions, of course, is a double-edged sword because residents are very busy and you don't want to necessarily bother them with essentially dumb questions. I know people will say there's no such thing as a dumb question, but there are some questions that are really easy to just Google and look up the answers versus kind of bothering a resident from their workflow and essentially annoying them, so to speak, if you do ask too many questions. So with that being said, I would just recommend you always Google your question first, kind of make sure you have your own base knowledge on what you're going to be asking, and then go ahead and ask the resident that question. Just because, like I said, if you are working with a resident who is particularly grumpy that day, it may negatively impact your evaluations if you are just asking them question after question. All right, so for my fifth and final mistake, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of background information to give you context on this mistake. So as a fourth year medical student, when you are applying to residencies, most medical students just apply to several programs, and a lot of programs just receive mass applications, and they're really trying to weed out who's actually interested in the program and who is just mass sending out applications. Now, one way people recommend that you show interest in a program is by cold calling those programs and just saying, hey, my name is Ethan Jose. I'm a medical student at this program. I'm very interested in your program because X, Y, and Z. And I just wanted to know if you guys were able to take a look at my application or where you guys are at in the application process. I applied to programs all over the country, and I didn't necessarily do a ton of research on the programs. I just kind of cast my wide net. And then one day I was just sitting at home calling all these programs. I'd probably called about 10 to 12 programs already. And then I got to the last program on my list, which was in Hawaii, and previously no one has answered their phone. All of my calls have went to voicemail. I left a voicemail explaining who I am, telling them I'm interested in their program and just wanted to hear back from them. But the program in Hawaii actually answered the phone. It was the end of the day. I was actually shocked that they answered, and my mind just went blank. The program coordinator answered the phone and said, "Oh, we're so glad that you're interested in our program. Can you tell me why you're interested in this program?" And I just absolutely blanked. I was like, "Oh, well, I just grew up going to Hawaii every year with my family. I really love it there, and I could see myself staying in Hawaii in the future to practice medicine." Which really is not a good reason why I wanted to go to the program, because I basically told them I was just interested in the program because I like to vacation in Hawaii, which is a really bad answer. I do not recommend giving that as one of your answers. And then they also asked me if I had any questions about the program, and I said, no, I don't have any questions at this moment, but I will let you know in the future if I do, which is also a red flag, showing that I didn't really do any research on the program or had any follow-up questions. So if you are going to cold call programs, I'd recommend you write out a list saying why you're interested, maybe give 3 bullet points why you're interested in the program, and then maybe 1 or 2 questions saying, hey, I read this about your program. Could you explain to me a little more about this? Or I have a question about this that you mentioned on your website. Could you explain this more? Because you never know if they're actually going to answer the phone, and you don't want to be stuck in my situation where I came across as not knowing anything about the program and totally unprepared basically to ask any questions or to answer any questions from the program. All right, guys, so those were my 5 biggest mistakes. If you guys have any big mistakes you've made in medical school, or any funny moments that you now look back on as a resident in medical school, make sure you drop those in the comments below. We're all human, we all make mistakes, we all learn from our mistakes, and that's why I'm sharing this video, so hopefully you guys can avoid the mistakes that I made as a medical student. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys like the video, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.